Welcome back to Whovo Review. We are examining part 2 of the Zygon story this year, the Zygon Inversion. I am Farrar, and I am back with Lewis.
Hello.
Paul.
Hi there.
And someone we haven't heard from since last season, Chris, is back with us.
Hello. Glad to be back.
Welcome back. All right. Well, here we are with something that Lewis mentioned last time. He said, after Kill the Moon, I'm really hoping this writer can stick the ending.
I think he did.
I think he did. I think he came up with some very good ideas that weren't your typical, oh, look, it's a twist just for the sake of a twist, which we've seen a lot in TV recently and even in Doctor Who. I don't think anyone guessed that the boxes were empty. I think most people were thinking there was something in them, not just a couple of buttons that didn't do anything. So that was pretty good.
Not to mention the most rousing Doctor-esque speech, I think, in the entire oeuvre of the new series.
You know,
Indeed.
That was good. And I like the fact that we had a speech that actually means something. You know, one of the things that you mentioned last season was that we haven't seen a lot of the Doctor playing an important role in kind of intergalactic relations. And this time he did, as like peacekeeper extraordinaire, touching on the current events where it seems like almost every Western nation is at war with something or someone. I think we got most of the topical references out of the way in the first episode. This episode seemed to me a little more fast-paced. It was the good resolution to the story, and it didn't hammer me over the head quite as much with the politics as the first episode did.
Well,
or
no.
maybe because I was used to it, I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, you can't neglect that in light of the speech, and that's where the whole thing reaches a head and comes to a stalemate.
But prior to that and after that, I was able to forget that I was looking at topical science fiction, and I was just able to enjoy the adventure.
It was a very solid two-parter. The second part built on the first part. It didn't like fall flat like potentially could have happened. The character development between the relationship between Clara and Clara's doppelganger, Bonnie, was pretty fantastic. I still think by the end of it, we still don't know exactly how much what really happened there. I think we have a clue as to a possibility that the Clara that we think is Clara may still not be. There may be still something going on there because what if the Clara that the Doctor's with is herself a copy? Because at the very end of this episode, we come back again and we have two Osgoods.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you've got another copy of a copy.
Well, what I was thinking at the very end was that both of the Osgoods that we've seen are Zygons, and the original has been killed.
Right.
I don't know about that. You know, they made that a little blurry with the inhaler.
Mm-hmm.
Does the Zygon need an inhaler?
No,
or is that
but
simply keeping up appearances?
That's just keeping up appearances. They both had inhalers in the first part, too.
Yeah. Well, they're being a little more mindful about that, but I think early on the human had the inhaler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the way you could tell them apart.
Yeah, in fact, I need to go back and watch the original episode, the one where we set up, the Zygon Osgood, and then Missy bumped off what looked like the human Osgood, but was it?
Speaking of Osgood, I think they really redeemed her character, in my view.
Yeah.
I think she's a fully fleshed out character now. She's not just a foil for the fans. I know people loved her as a foil for the fans, but I prefer three-dimensional characters to two-dimensional characters, and I think they did a good job with her.
A lot of people love to see her come back to be a full-on companion for the Doctor. But
Be interesting. I don't know how that would work, though, having somebody who's such a fangirl of the Doctor be the companion. That
I don't think it would
might
work that well.
not work out at all.
But then again, there are things that have never been done in Doctor Who, and they could make them work.
Yeah.
I mean,
She is great, and having her as his Earth-based representative in unit, I think is brilliant.
yeah.
what about the fact that she didn't know what TARDIS stood for?
See, there's proof she's actually Zygon.
Or she wants to keep
See?
the Doctor guessing, right?
I don't know.
Maybe. Maybe that's just something that Unit didn't have. They knew that it was called TARDIS, but no one ever explained it on tape.
Was that ever pieced out during any of the unit stories? Did anybody ever sit down and say,
I feel like the third Doctor had to have
explained
blurted
it to
that out.
Joe or something like
Yeah.
that? You'd think so.
So do we think the status quo has been reestablished now? We've got the 2 Zygon Osgoods. The peace has been established. We've got...
As it has been 15 times.
Right.
Yeah, that's the twist.
And we've
that's
got...
the twist.
We've got Kate. Do we think we really do have Kate Stewart human? How do we know?
You know,
How do we know?
some people, some of the fans, some of the more nitpicky fans who love to voice their displeasure, were actually picking apart Gemma Redgrave's acting, saying that, I can't believe how stiff and boring her performance was. And I was thinking, are you kidding? I mean, she's doing a very good portrayal of an authority figure who is trying to hold on to her control while still being scared to death.
True.
While things are just sort of spiraling out of control around her. I mean, she's losing control of her own soldiers, losing track of people. People are disappearing, people are getting killed, and there's 20 million Zygons on the verge of either dying or taking over the world. I think that makes for a pretty tense situation, and it looked to me like she was a pretty tense character. But by the same token, some people were saying that the way she was acting, because she was looking, not quite as emotionally involved as you might say a human would, some people were saying that they think that this version of Kate Stewart is, in fact, a Zygon.
Makes sense.
I think it could go either way. I mean, we don't know. And for the purpose of this story, it doesn't matter.
No, although it would be interesting to answer whether the Zygon Kate Stewart is a better commander than the real human Kate.
Nice.
Maybe.
Stories like Power of Three, she was completely useless.
Well, Unit has always gone back and forth in Doctor Who between being really useless and really useful. Sometimes they're just grunts who fire bullets and run around in circles not really accomplishing anything, and sometimes they really have good ideas and they help the Doctor out. I guess it just depends on the story. Speaking of which, 5 rounds rapid.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Great callback.
I was not expecting that callback.
Me neither.
And wow, I'm not sure it was supposed to be a laugh out loud moment, but maybe it was supposed to be more of a heartfelt tribute. But I actually laughed out loud at that point. I just kind of went, "Ha, Brigadier! 5 rounds rapid." I remember the demons.
Somebody's got to represent the peace through force side of the equation too.
True.
It balances out against the Doctor's idealism.
And since UNIT is no longer affiliated with the United Nations,
Right.
they can involve whatever countries and or forces they want to write in the episode for an out-of-universe explanation, I guess.
Commander here. The first one has been changed. I'm going to unit to retrieve the Osgood box.
What do we think about the fact that one Zygon's mind being changed kept the peace with 20 million others?
I don't know.
Or just the faction, the one faction. I mean, is that really a in-universe realistic but outside of universe realistic expectation?
Well, I have a question about that because I'm not familiar with previous Zygon lore. Do the Zygons have kind of like a
hive mind?
Mental connection, kind of like the Borg, to where maybe if you could change one mind, it would kind of spread throughout the other ones? Or are we looking at just a unique individual here, and maybe if they do change anyone's mind, they'll have to do it the way we do, just like verbally and talking to people and getting to think differently?
I would think they're more individual just by the fact that there was, the possibility of a splinter group.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Forming.
Yeah.
So,
of course, there's splinter groups of Daleks too, and they have a hive mind.
True.
Or
True.
They're networked, at least.
Splinter groups of Borg, even.
Yeah.
In Star Trek universe.
What's wrong with pointless? I once invented an invisible watch.
Speaking of the Zygons, how do we think they were treated in this episode compared to previous episodes? I think they got a lot of good screen time. They didn't get a lot of dialogue, but they certainly, for the kids at home, I think they would have been cowering behind the couch as they should have been.
Well, that harrowing bit where that Zygon who just wanted to fit in was forced out of his seclusion and had to immolate himself.
Yeah.
That was pretty harsh.
mm-hmm.
Did that have anything to do with Sullivan's gas? Because I remember the whole thing, turning the Zygons inside out.
Yeah.
What I was thinking was that
That was a bluff, though, right?
well, or maybe it does exist, and that's what it does, but not what we think it does. When it says it rewrites the Zygon's DNA, well, does that mean that it rewrites them such that they can no longer camouflage themselves, thus bringing the Zygon inside out?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Was this Zygon exposed to the gas, or was there some other reason for him no longer being able to contain his human disguise?
Well, Bonnie triggered that, but how did she trigger that? Did she
Right.
somehow
Was it
have access
electronic
to the
or-
gas?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure how she did that exactly. There might be an off-screen explanation for that.
Yeah, it might be another case where something was cut for time because that was a packed episode.
Yeah.
The first thing I'd do if I wanted to invade the world would be to kill you.
Thanks.
What do we think of the underscoring?
I didn't notice it this time.
Me neither. And I think
I
that's a
didn't
good
either.
thing.
That's the
Yeah,
point,
probably
right?
so.
I think that's a good thing. There have been a couple of episodes in this season where I've thought, man, this music is really out of place. But I think here it just lent a lot of atmosphere and it didn't get in the way, which is exactly what an underscore should do for an adventure TV show. So kudos to Murray Gold.
Yeah.
Very effective. Yeah.
I have a big criticism. Toward the end, the Doctor makes an impassioned speech for peace and dialogue. He says that they have to learn how to sit down and talk, right?
Right.
And then he hits the reset button without
then they
allowing
don't.
them to sit down and talk.
Exactly. I wondered about that.
Yeah. I don't know whether that meant anything or whether that was simply a means to an end of the episode without spending another episode.
I think it might have been a means to the end of the episode.
Yeah.
I also think that the speech gave us the point of the episode, and yet the reset button showed us that they're not willing to talk yet. Mm-hmm. And he's going to have to do it again. And he's going to have to try to convince them to talk. Just like it's happened 15 times already. Or he might have been exaggerating, but as far as we know, 15 times. And it'll happen again in the future.
But why did he make the choice? Kate doesn't know what happened. Bonnie knows exactly what happened. I mean, there would have been a benefit to both of them having retained that knowledge to avoid the confrontation in the future. Because
Right.
the way they're playing it now is the only way the confrontation happens if the one side is the aggressor, but both sides have some complicity in the whole process.
And not only that, the Doctor taking it upon himself to be, that ultimate arbiter. I forgive you, as if he had the authority to even say that. And then pulling the reset button.
If they had played up his previous role as protector of Earth a little more, I think the I forgive you thing might have had a little more weight. But we haven't really seen that in this series, in this season. And I had kind of forgotten that he had placed himself in that role. Mostly what I've remembered, though, is the whole I have duty of care over Clara thing,
Yeah.
which is a different thing.
It does kind of play into that ambiguity, even from the previous season, where he was very concerned about, am I a good man, and all that. And it's almost like, in spite of his best intentions, and, he always wants to do good, he doesn't necessarily always resolve things in the best possible manner. And hey, when he gets on the plane, when he's president, he does the Richard Nixon thing too. So, just another example.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a nice multifaceted Doctor now. We're seeing a Doctor who has good intentions, good motives, and doesn't always do what he should. He's occasionally impulsive. Like you said, he likes pouncing around in a big plane. Would it have made more sense for him to go via TARDIS? Sure, but why not? He's he's the rock and roll Doctor.
He's got attitude.
He likes to make an entrance.
Dr. Disco.
Yeah, he's Dr. Disco now. Dr. John Disco instead of Dr. John Smith.
He's his own man, but I love the fact that he tends to pull a lot of the Doctorish characteristics from his own fandom, from his own past, the fourth and the third particularly.
Oh, the big goofy grin that he gave the guys in the vehicle
Isn't it dazzling?
when they were walking around.
yeah.
I thought, man, whoa. I haven't seen a grin that big since Tom Baker's tenure.
Absolutely.
Don't call me Zygella. My name's Bonnie.
If Missy would have been in this episode, it would have been almost like a homecoming with all the...
Unit?
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
we would have needed a whole nother episode.
Would that be a bad thing? Then?
No.
No.
Love the old 12-parters.
Yeah, me too.
Inferno.
I just started rewatching Inferno last night.
Nice.
7 parts.
Wow.
Glorious.
Wasn't it supposed to be 4?
Whoops.
I think that's one of those things where they had a 3-part story lined up and then it didn't happen, so they had to stretch Inferno to 7 parts.
Right.
Bring in Terrence Dicks for a rewrite.
But out of that we got the whole alternate universe thing.
Yeah, how cool is that?
The Brigadier with the mustache.
The Blinovich limitation effect.
Ooh, that would be a great thing to return to, wouldn't it?
The whole
Fashion Liz.
alternate timeline
Yeah.
thing. Well, we haven't seen that since the episode with the blimps in the 10th Doctor's tenure, where they ended up on a parallel Earth with Rose and Mickey.
Wow, that's true. The Cybus universe might be that same universe, I suppose.
Could be. Could have been. Yeah.
Although,
who knows?
I don't know.
Yeah, they messed about with that in the Star Trek universe and then didn't really go back to it. They went into...
They did go back to it. They went back to it in Enterprise.
Wait, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Oh.
They messed about with the many worlds theory.
Oh.
But then whenever we went to an alternate universe, it was always the same universe.
alternate universe, right.
So, as I said, they messed about with it, but they didn't really go as far as they could have
No.
with the whole many worlds theory. And I don't think we're going to see that in Doctor Who, although what more is there than the universe that the Doctor has already saved? Well, he could start saving other universes as well. Why not?
From himself.
Or from different versions of himself.
Right.
Yeah.
In an alternate universe, he's the master.
Well, having just rewatched Pyramids of Mars, there's always those universes that he didn't save.
Right.
And they could show more of that, too.
True. You could have someone who was kind of like an Omega character, someone who was trapped at the end of their own universe and broke into our universe to get revenge on the Doctor.
Yeah, I suppose Omega is also overdue for a return.
Yeah, way
So,
overdue.
Have you
They
heard?
gave him a big finish episode.
Have you heard of the Return of Omega? There's actually apparently there's a canine movie that's going to have the chief protagonist.
Oh, I know.
Wow.
Will be Omega.
I'm bracing for it being the wrong K9.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
but he's
forget
been
it.
upgraded again,
Forget it.
so his floppy ears don't look quite as floppy. But,
Does he fly now?
oh, he's been flying. Yeah.
Not
That's
going to
that's just
get
not
them
going to
money.
be in my head canon.
No.
It's just
Good luck,
Nope.
Bob Baker.
Yeah. Ring that for all it's worth, Bob Baker and Dave Martin.
Did anybody notice the Easter egg, the William Hartnell painting guarding the safe?
Yeah.
Oh,
that was in
cool.
both parts. But it was,
Oh, was
it was
it?
a lot easier to see this time around.
Yeah. The first time the camera just kind of
Yeah.
trucked past
But
it.
this time it was most evidently the first Doctor in his first, William Hartnell in the wig and costume as the first Doctor. Really nice. Which is kind of interesting because we didn't see Unit until the
Third Doctor.
Second Doctor?
Second
Second,
Doctor. Yeah.
end of the second Doctor's
It would have
tenure.
been less surprising to see the second Doctor there.
Yeah.
You know?
The Web of Fear, was that the story?
Yeah, I think that's
so.
when we first saw the Brigadier, although he wasn't the
Yeah.
Brigadier yet.
Right, he was Colonel Lethbridge.
He was Colonel Lethbridge Stewart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a little while since Unit's been around. Unit's been around almost as long as Doctor Who's been around. Just a few years.
I can kill you. Go on then.
You talked about character development. Where do we see Clara after this episode? To me, she seemed more utilized as a normal companion in this two-parter than the super special.
Well, Jenna Coleman was certainly more utilized as Bonnie than she was of Clara, you know.
This is true.
Yeah, there was no growth in Clara's character. I mean, when the Doctor came in and there was Clara, he didn't like. Did he run up to her and say, "I'm so glad"? He just totally ignored her. He went straight to Bonnie because at that point, she was filling the role of a companion and really wasn't that important. Mm-hmm. But everything was focused on her portrayal of Bonnie, which was really Jenna Coleman did a fantastic job, really fantastic job. But at the end, when we see them in the TARDIS, he seems so cold to her. You know, she says, he said something to the effect that I thought you were. She said, "What did you think when you thought I was dead?" He says, "Well, I thought you were dead for about
Longest month of my
for
life.
a month."
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh, it's just been 5 minutes." He said, "I'll be the judge of time." And he turns around, walks away, and goes up the stairs. It's almost like he cannot make eye contact. He can't look her right in the eye because he knows that his time with her is limited. There's something else going on that he's not revealing to her
Yeah, I thought the same thing watching that scene.
I thought that was a very touching scene where he said it was the longest month of my life.
Yeah.
Because if you're very close to someone and then they disappear,
Yeah.
you know, talk to anyone who's, you see people on the news, you know, their child goes missing for 2 days, you know, and what do they say? Oh my God, it felt like years. You know?
That's the way I read it too.
Yeah, that's how I felt it.
Kate, are you all right?
Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be?
It's just I heard otherwise.
One more thing that I wanted to talk about. Speaking of things that worked so well that we didn't notice them, this episode, for 2 episodes now, we've had most of the authority figures have been women. Kate Stewart, and also who was the other woman with the glasses that Clara dealt with? Another high up, another female.
Don't remember the name.
And kind of interesting that we saw the surviving officer in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. I mean, turned out not to be an officer, but all the same, was a woman. And I didn't notice this until it was pointed out to me that, hey, how about that? A mostly female cast of supporting characters in this episode.
And it didn't even really make itself, it didn't call attention to itself.
No, it wasn't like somebody wrote a feminist manifesto into this story. You know?
The fact that it didn't register as out of place is a testament to the fact that it shouldn't have registered being out of place.
Thank you, Mosquito Patrol.
Is that a new band, Mosquito Patrol? I love it.
It makes me optimistic. There's all the noise going around. Like,
Well,
there might
There's
be
been a lot of mosquitoes lately.
Well, everybody said, there's all this talk about there might be a female doctor at some point, and some people are against it, some people are for it, whatever. My feeling about that is, like, if they treat the role the way they treated these roles that you were mentioning, I would be okay with it. Like, just, make them normal characters. You don't have to make a big deal about their gender.
Though.
Yeah, I think it depends on
There's some actresses that could pull it off,
Well,
like Judi Dench, but they're few and far between.
I think it also depends on the writers because, for a long time, from 1965 all the way up until 1989, the Doctor was basically an asexual character. He did not have motives. He did not have desires that came from that area of his brain. He was not written, to be human like that. That was a very human thing. Physical desire, romantic desire, those are very human things.
Well, not only that, I think Missy put it the best, in the beginning of this season.
They have out-evolved those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Or there's no way that we humans could relate to their conception of,
Right. Can't you think beyond this? It's
Exactly.
friendship.
And that's why I think it depends on the writers because, for 70 years we've had Superman and no one has focused on his love life. Now I've been watching Supergirl, and what happens in the very second episode? They hook her up with Jimmy Olsen, and suddenly everybody's concerned with her love life.
That's not true at all, though. Lois and Clark was
promos.
all about her. Lois and Clark was all about Superman and Lois's love life.
Well, that's true, but in the first few years that he was introduced as Superman, when he was being played by what's
and
his name?
you're talking
Charles
about on the
Reeves.
screen. They did the wedding of Superman in the comics years before Lois and Clark.
I never read the comics. I'm just familiar with the old serials and the movies.
Hell, Superman 2, he dropped his powers in order to wed Lois. Remember that?
Nope.
Okay. I could lend it to you.
Oopsies.
I still am disappointed with the obsession over Supergirl's love life, though. Like, even the announcer in the Next Time trailer, it was like, Supergirl has to defend, has to juggle her life as a hero and her love life. I'm like, who cares? She's a superhero. She can do what she wants.
Right.
Well, that's getting way off the topic.
Demographics.
Yeah, it really is.
It's all about demographics, really.
Yeah, it depends on who they're aiming the show at.
Exactly. And when they're aiming the show at everybody, they want action and they want drama. So,
But do you think the fact that Doctor Who is now aiming at in a later time slot is a reflection of the demographic that it's being aimed at now?
Very probably.
Because it seems to be getting darker and more violent.
Compared to what?
compared to
Colin Baker's
compared to earlier
season.
Doctor. Well, no, compared to a few years ago when it was on at 5:15. Mm-hmm. You know, the violence was kept pretty light. The danger was there.
Right.
The fear was there. The horror was there. But I think it was all pretty kid friendly, and the body count has been rising in recent seasons. You know, in seasons 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah. It's to me that's bracing. I mean, to me that's almost like, well, it's not quite to Philip Hinchcliffe levels yet, but it's getting there. So
now the body count's not quite there, is it?
I don't think you're going to see the same time slot next series. It's not going to happen. The ratings have
been
suffered
abysmal,
because of that.
right?
Yeah.
I think they're going to bring it back to more 7:15 time slot, 6:45,
I
whatever.
think they have to.
Yeah,
they're
because
gonna have
8:15, 8:30, people are beginning to wind down. Plus, sporting events are on at that time.
Plus, kids are going to sleep
after the news.
potentially.
Yeah, kids are going to bed.
And we don't want them to go to sleep behind the sofa.
Or under the chair.
No one else will ever have to live like this. No one else will ever have to feel this pain. Not on my watch.
Next week, we're going to look at another Base Under Siege episode, found footage episode. Mm-hmm. So
that's a first for Doctor Who, isn't it?
I believe it is. Yeah. And if they do it right, it could be very Hinchcliffian, as you say.
Fingers crossed.
All right.
Hearts crossed.
Thanks, guys, for being here, and we'll see you next week.
All right.
Thank you.